Hello, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk today. My name is Isabel McClintock and I'm the Department Manager in A&E in Alton. I'm a nurse by background. I started in A&E after doing midwifery training and working in some of the general wards in 1989 and progressed to the position of nurse manager of the department just over 9 years ago. Our previous speakers have alluded to the fact that it is a Type 1 department. It's a very busy department, and just to reinforce the fact that, that all the time that I'm there, the staff, we do have a very committed group of staff that we encourage very high values in terms of their work and practice, and certainly in how they treat patients when they come into the department. So basically that's all I'll say at that point.
My name is James Steele. I'm one of the three substantive consultants in the department. I did my training in emergency medicine in Northern Ireland in the Northern Ireland rotation. I've been in Alton now since 1999, and since April this year I've been the clinical lead with responsibility for the emergency department and the acute medical unit on the Alton site. In terms of an opening statement, I think really the Chief Executive's statement has very clearly summarised the big issues that I think we would also like to emphasise, and really all I would want to say is perhaps to develop a point that actually you, Chairman, took up with Mr McKinney about the background in Alton, because I think where we have come from has informed our journey and the strategies that we have developed. As we all know, congestion is probably the number one challenge in emergency medicine, regionally, nationally, and indeed internationally. And it's a huge issue for patients and for patient care. There's abundant evidence that congested emergency departments lead to poorer outcomes for patients in terms of morbidity, mortality, length of stay, comfort, and all the issues around dignity. And as I say, we have come from a slightly different place than other hospitals and other departments. Whenever I started in 1999, we did have, as you mentioned, a system of direct GP admission to specialty wards. So if a patient was seen by a GP and that patient was deemed to need admission because of COPD, they went straight to the respiratory unit. If they had chest pain, they would go straight to the cardiology unit. And that was a very unusual, possibly a unique arrangement, but it seemed to work. It seemed to work from the point of view of the patients, it worked from the point of view of the specialty teams, and it certainly worked from the point of view of the emergency department, because these were groups of patients who did not actually come through ED and didn't then cause congestion. About 7 or so years ago, things changed, demands increased, the system became strained, and that pattern no longer was viable. And the only default at that time that was available was for the patients to come through the emergency department. And that then in turn led to congestion, long waiting times, and all the problems for patients that has entailed. And I suppose in many ways we've been trying to not quite get back to the original plan, but to develop a different strategy to in some ways replicate the best parts of that plan. And I think we were different, as I say, from some other trusts. Whenever other places ran into problems with congestion, they instinctively said, we need more resources in the emergency department. We said, no, that will not solve throughput issues, that will not solve congestion. If you want congestion solved, you need to invest in an acute medical unit, in surgical assessment. Investment in ED will achieve certain things. It will achieve better supervision of junior staff, it will achieve better decision making, but in terms of throughput, the big issue is to invest elsewhere, and our trust management were receptive to that. So, I say, really just to develop that background a little bit, because I think it has been very important in the way that we've tried to tackle issues of congestion, which has all the adverse effects on patient care.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of very quick initial questions. What we've heard in evidence so far has been, and very much what you touched on, the importance of the whole systems approach. And it's interesting you've taken a slightly different route from other trusts. But what I suppose I'm interested in is that the rhetoric is the right person, the right person in the right place at the right time, and the idea then that emergency departments can do their job. And one of the frustrations in the evidence we've heard from clinicians and others is that they take the rap, if you like, for things that are beyond their control. And if people used out-of-hours GP services as they're intended, or minor injury units as intended, if the community care services are there and are seamless with emergency departments, and if the admission procedures and the beds are there at the time when it's needed, then EDs might meet their targets more readily and more easily. And you've gone down a slightly different route. I suppose what I'm interested in is in the Western Trust, of all those kind of wrap-around other services that are crucial to emergency departments, which ones are working as intended and which ones aren't, and where your frustrations are in terms of whether the right people are in the right place for the emergency department to allow you to do what you were originally intended?
I think, like anything, there are many parts to the jigsaw. Some of the ideas that have been touted that 30% of patients attending emergency departments shouldn't be there are probably overblown. And I think whenever GPs have been brought into emergency departments specifically to see GP-type patients or primary care-type patients, they haven't been able to take up 30% of the workload. I think proper co-location of primary care services is helpful, however. It is part of the solution. And we do have that in Altnagelvin. And we have good protocols whereby if patients attend out of hours, they can be directed to the out of hours service from the point of triage. And by and large, that works quite well. Similarly, the primary care service can refer patients directly through to us. I think it is more a matter of trying to ensure that only those patients who need to be in the emergency department are directed through it. Blue light ambulance patients who self-present, should be in the emergency department. As Mr. McKinney has said, a patient who's already been seen by a GP and that GP deems the patient needs to be admitted doesn't really need to come through an emergency department to be second-guessed, perhaps by a doctor with less experience than the GP, and then referred on. That's a step that's not really adding value. So again, going back to our acute medical unit and surgical assessment model, they have made an improvement. They've been up and running for a number of years now, but they are still maturing. To use your colleague, Mr. Hunt's or Professor Hunt's analogy, they are still maturing. There's still value to be got from those, but I think it is the right pattern to have adopted.
Okay. My second question, which is we've been quite a bit about both the morbidity and mortality approaches that trusts have taken, and also the approach to severe adverse incidents. And I've been struck in the evidence that the emphasis has been on the importance of the kind of learning and shared experience. On the other hand, severe adverse incident is while the emphasis is on that, the words themselves show that this is something that's quite fundamental has happened, and therefore it's very important that patient involvement, etc., and other things. So I'm interested to get your sense of how the severe adverse incident issues is dealt with in the trust and how they're looked at, and also just to take us through any issues you have in terms of the approach you take to kind of mortality, morbidity within the trust.
Okay. I think the serious adverse incidents, I have found that people are very ready to flag issues up as serious adverse incidents. It has often been the clinicians themselves who have gone to our risk management department and said, look, there's an incident here. We think this is a serious adverse incident and it needs to be looked into as such. And obviously, as is part of the procedure, relatives, or patient themselves or relatives are informed that the process is taking place. I have sat on a couple of serious adverse incident committees, and I have found that issues have been gone into in detail, that it has been an open and a transparent process.
Can you give me an example, for example, where you've changed practice as a result of something? I mean, I'm trying to get a feel for how it works in practice.
Sure. There have been issues around patients on warfarin who have sustained head injuries, not just in our own trust, but they have been issues, and I've been involved in a serious adverse incident in relation to such an issue, and there has been regional advice about that, which we have adopted, highlighting the importance of, at the point of triage, establishing if a patient who has had a head injury is on warfarin, and if so, they're fast-tracked for CT scan. So that has come into being.
And on the morbidity and mortality, how does that work in the trust on that side of?
Again, we do review, obviously, morbidity and mortality. We go through the patients who have been through our resuscitation room and any other patients who there have been any perceived issues around, and we analyse we have a multidisciplinary forum where we discuss those patients and try to extract whatever learning is there to be extracted, and that can then be disseminated through our regular teaching of our juniors and also at regular handover meetings. I would have to say, and again the Chief Executive has been very frank about the constraints we're under in terms of our staff numbers. We are not able to have morbidity and mortality meetings as often as we would like.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you then my final question, and a very quick one and a short answer if we can in time, and it's to both of you. If there were two things that could be done that would make your life eminently easier within the earshot of your chair, Chief Executive, what are they and why would you choose those?
I think, one of the first things I say, and it was approved in the 100% day, that the resources that we identified that was required for the day, if we had investment to make these happen, it certainly would make it a much better place for the patients and certainly for the staff and staff morale and overall quality, within the emergency department. And certainly, that was a challenge for the 100% day. There was a lot of cynical staff about what's the point, but the point was to identify that. So that is one thing, and that is the outflow of patients that makes it a better experience for the patient coming into the department.
When you say resources invested, it's where? What's the?
Well, the senior decision making, we alluded to the service improvement programme that we had, and within that are the templates for improvement. So it's about getting the patient, as you said previously said, to the right person at the right time. That they're not held in A&E, and A&E maybe doctors assuming responsibility for completing all of those investigations. And so we've identified that yes, if a patient is stabilised and they can be referred quickly and managed quickly by those specialty teams, and that's the way to go. It's the investment in specialist nurses who on the day were in the department that can autonomously manage patients presenting with cardiac problems. And on that day there was a patient came in and had a fantastic experience on the day. For him it was a terrible event for him because he came in with chest pain. He was 48 years of age, but within the hour he had his cardiac stent put on. So that's the experience we want for our patients. We don't want them waiting in the department for long periods of time to reach their final destination. So for me it's about improvements in flow and getting the patient moved on in a timely fashion.
And your second one?
My second one would be most definitely additional staff and resource to allow us to deliver the standard of care that we ultimately want to get to for all our patients, because we know we're not perfect. We have a vision to be perfect, but that is certainly what I would look for if I had a wish list of 2.
Okay.
Very similar wish list. I would like to see a system where we continue to improve the medical and surgical assessment of patients, so that we can pull them from the ED rather than ED trying to push them, if I can put it that way. So enhancing the assessment of these patients, and also improved medical staffing, particularly at middle grade and consultant level, the sort of more senior decision-making level.
Thank you. Aaron.
Thank you. I have only 2 questions, and one of them is picking up, Dr. Steele, on what you had said in terms of direct admissions, and you went on to say only those patients who should be in emergency departments should be direct through it. But previously you had said that direct admissions to specialist wards was stopped because there was pressure on that system.
Mm-hmm.
Now it seems to me the pressure on that system is now mirrored in emergency departments, and I'm wondering, what are your views about reverting to some sort of specialist admissions directly? Because as you've already said, it doesn't add value for another doctor with possibly less experience to see a patient to come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think difficulty in going back to the model that we had, or some of the difficulties, probably revolve around specialty training now in medicine. Specialty training has developed to a great extent, in the past decade or so, and I think with a lot of patients presenting with comorbidities, complex histories, it's in some ways quite difficult to get back to that idea, right? This is a patient with a purely respiratory problem, they go directly to the respiratory ward. So I think there is still the role for a more generalist approach. The emergency department should be defined by time-critical conditions. Somewhere in between the emergency department and the true specialist units, there is that sort of acute medical area where they are trained and expert in dealing with patients with the more complex, undifferentiated issues, but in a not just as time-critical a fashion as the emergency department. So I think that's where that comes in, and I think that probably is the way that it is the way we have gone, and it's the way we should continue to go.
Thank you. My other question is about, I don't know if in the Alton Galvin you have written emergency department standards that you expect staff to adhere to, but if you haven't written ones, I'm sure you have implicit standards, courtesy, etc., in terms of the patient's experience. And I'm wondering, how do you set about monitoring and ensuring that the quality standards that you would want for the patients when they attend emergency departments are met?
I suppose, fundamentally, you're looking at that every single day of the week and all the time during shifts. You're looking at how people are spoken to, how they're communicated, how they're addressed. In terms of how the staff are, engaging with them. Do they know what's happening next in terms of their journey of care in the department? Are they getting pain relief? Are they being respected in terms of, are the curtains closed when they're being examined? And it's those fundamental things in terms of delivery of care that we look at on a day-to-day basis. There's also quality indicators that we measure sort of on a monthly basis in terms of, staff's attitude to hygiene, the delivery of care in terms of infection prevention, insertion of cannulas, things. So we audit that in a formal process. And then, any, I suppose it's complaints that come into the department, that we look at trends and complaints, and we feed back very robustly to staff in terms of themes, and certainly, we look for patterns. Is there a problem with our staff in terms of the performance of individuals? And certainly have mechanisms within the trust if there are concerns in that regard. I think, when you walk into a department, it's easy to look and see if, things are, if quality is good, if your staff are smart, if they are well represented themselves, and if they're adhering to policies and procedures, then that indicates quality, and we continually monitor that. And in terms of, and I suppose it's to help in the delivery of the quality of our service, what we now are engaging in, and it was referred to, was the refurbishment of the department. And whilst, we in the past did not have a lot of patient involvement in terms of developments in the department, we now have service users sitting on the group with us. Both in terms of the refurbishment, but also in terms of progressing work of the 10,000 Voices campaign. We had our first meeting in June, which was very, as the staff highlighted that attended the meeting, very enlightening, because staff maybe have a perception of what people want, but then, with the user involvement, it was actually quite good. And we certainly will be planning, very soon another meeting with them. So by them feeding back to us also what it is that's important to them, and, and us trying to react to that, then that's very important in terms of monitoring and delivering quality.
And are your emergency department standards, are they written?
We have an induction programme for staff, and certainly we would have general hospital policies, that we would, all employees, and certainly without the exception of emergency department staff, are expected to comply with, and certainly will be monitored in terms of compliance as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Isabel.
Paul.
Thank you. I'll be brief. A follow-up question to Les's questions about the serious adverse incidents. And it might be you haven't caught this yet because it was only published a couple of months ago, but in the learning report, Serious Adverse Incidents of the board and the PHA, published in June of 2014, it ends by saying that they've recognised a need to enhance service users' families' involvement in the SAI process. Now, it might be you can't comment, in which case that's fine, but could you briefly elaborate on how service users' families are involved in the SAI process presently? They're asking for that to be improved. Maybe it doesn't need improvement in your trust, because this is for all trusts, but how are they involved at the moment, please?
What I can tell you is that our risk management staff, if a serious adverse incident is instigated, they do contact the patient and or relatives, and will meet with them to inform them of the situation and to give them updates. And that may also involve meetings with clinicians who are involved in reviewing the case.
And then with the result?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you care to add, Isabel? You don't have to, but...
No, but certainly James was talking earlier about, the involvement of the SAI with the warfarin, and I'm very aware that that was part of the process where the family, and they certainly got the report and 8 questions which came back into the trust that we met to review and discuss and go back to them with answers. So
go back to the families.
Yes.
Yeah. And I understand from this that they're changing the forms to require that this happens more often than it's happened hitherto. You're both very much on the front line. How are you involved in the commissioning process, or is this a job for somebody else?
No, well, certainly from my perspective, I don't think it's a job for somebody else, because if we need services, or we are, say, delivering in the front line, so we know what the needs are in terms of staff and developments, and our senior managers do involve us. They might come to us, for what ideas for a change or innovation or something, and development pathways. So we identify the need, maybe in terms of the resource to make it happen, or this, including the staff. So we're involved from an early stage. And the investment templates that go down and maybe become business cases at a later stage, then we are involved.
So would you meet with any member of the LCG, or would that be perhaps your management's responsibility, or would you meet with board members, non-executive board members?
I think
I'm just trying to understand how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's as Isabel illustrates that we will be feeding back to our senior managers, and I do want to be fair. I found them to be very receptive and very supportive. So most of the time, it's that indirect kind of relationship, but. We have been in meetings with one of the commissioners there, with our senior managers, and us being able to see them face to face as well and put our views. And
just recently, following the meeting, we were both at the meeting, and I invited them to come along to the department over an issue that we were trying to get some funding for, which he very kindly did, and he came along. So we. And took him around the department, but it had been before in previous commissioning plans as well. So yes, we know who he is, and we see him, and I say, I think we have good relationship with management in terms of identifying what our need is and taking the cases forward.
Thank you. You're both incredibly busy people. Have you had time to do any human rights training in recent years?
Not human rights training per se, but certainly equality, I think, and human rights go hand in hand. And so, personally speaking, I haven't. But what I would say is, that fundamental to nurses and nursing, and I suppose anybody in the care environment, are the core principles of human rights that we certainly would try to role model ourselves. And development of service and practice always consider. That elements of human rights are brought on, and certainly we would expect that within our staff. Probably different training courses that, specialist practice courses that the staff go on, there's elements of human rights brought into that in terms of, the specifics of what they're doing, so.
So not sort of self-standing human rights training, but you're suggesting that the human rights stuff is integrated into other aspects of training.
Yes.
There are certainly quite a number of learning opportunities available in relation to various aspects of human rights.
Right. So I'm still not quite clear if there's human rights training available. Self-standing, no, but integrated into other training, yes.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, there's a specific equality and diversity training, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it's, however, I would say it's not that we negate the importance of it.
Yeah.
And I think, I suppose it would be fair to say that within A&E, a lot of the training is very focused on the clinical need, resuscitation and elements of that, So, and that's what I'm saying. Aspects of human rights come into maybe the courses
implicitly, not explicitly.
No.
I'm just very conscious that the values, the explicit values that you're talking about, correlate very closely to human rights values.
Yeah.
But often, I think it's fair to say, we're finding the human rights stuff is not explicitly there, and I'm struck by that. Finally, do you know who your human rights and equality officer is?
Mrs. O'Donnell, I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's sort of managed through the performance office. But
okay, James.
Apologies.
I don't know the name, but I know where they are.
Okay. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And again, if you want to augment anything that you've had to say to us today, please feel free to do so in writing. And finally, is there anything you want to finally say, or anything that you haven't had an opportunity to say? And
thank you.
Thank you for giving up what I know is precious time. It's very much appreciated by us. So thank you very much.